Alrighty, hello everybody, and welcome to the, unfortunately, final part of the Sub-Optimal Experience run. Yeah, it's, here's the thing. The run did not get softlocked. I thought it would get softlocked at multiple occasions. The problem is it kind of ran into critical existence failure, and, well, it's gonna take quite a while to remedy that. Any darn ways, to make a very, very long story short, this is the final bit of screenshots that I got before it turns out the save corrupted on being transferred over to my new device. Yeah, I sold the Vita again. It's a long story. We'll get into that later, but for now, let's just get on to what actually did survive of this run. So, ended up getting pounded into the dirt over and over by this one flimsy wizard, as, you know, as it's been. He's actually one of the few characters with what seems to be a set AI pattern, wherein he actually, like, him and Gildora will usually fairly effectively end up retreating through the map, basically using their flimsiness as a way to draw you into their kind of stronger units here. Normally, this sets up a pretty strong choke point at the front. If you try to go around the side, like Canopus wants to do, 2 turns into the fight when it's well past the point that you actually can do so anyway, then you'll kind of run into a situation where they end up getting sniped from that side. Usually the best way is to kind of take a 3-prong approach where you have a couple characters run up the front. They'll start dealing with that front line, keep them holed up over there. Usually one night or so is the best way to do that. And well, then you have your faster guys go around the sides. So that's what I was trying to do here. Basically have the debuffers go down the middle, hang out by the wall, throw out what they can, trying to have Andy here throw out some poison on their leader. My plan, one that, according to the numbers, actually would work here, is essentially to have him throw out poison, essentially have one of the characters running out around the side with a throwing javelin, hit the wizard guy once, have him take poison a couple times, and then have Canopus there with a sleepy finisher with his bow, and, you know, that would be more than enough to actually take him out. We're not at the biggest level deficit in the world here. It's still very doable. His, like, battle axe finishers are not doing a whole lot here, as you can see. But anything damage scaling is still able to get past his armor decently enough. Part of the problem is that a lot of the weapons these guys are running are absolute basic garbage, you know. They haven't been to a store, they haven't taken any extra fights, they're basically running the lowest possible level at any given point. So this is the worst case scenario for every single map. Now, I'm actually really impressed by this fight. Every time that I went through it again and again and again, yeah, you know, I kept getting a little bit closer and a little bit closer, and yeah, it was kind of awesome. Actually, for this bit over here, I was kind of curious if you could actually do a crit with a rock. So I went and I made a separate save, and I went back and I kept trying to reset this particular part to see if you could actually get a critical hit with a throwing rock to get the guy off a cliff. While I believe you can get it, I don't know how it's calculated, because I think I spent like an hour screwing around with that just to see if it would technically be possible at that point. But yeah, no, it didn't seem to want to happen. So then I figured, okay, the other map is actually usually way more difficult, so I wonder what happens if we just went for that one. And it turns out, yeah, this works a lot better for our team. So they end up coming over in slow amounts. Like, this is one that tends to start off fairly slow. You're dealing with those octopi for a few turns, then you're dealing with some of their heavies, then everybody starts getting close to you. You can't really go forward, because then you'll be overwhelmed with limited movement. And so you're kind of just stuck in the situation where you're dealing with these, you know, these slower guys coming at you, and hopefully you eventually get to the end, you surround their mercenary guy, or mercenary leader bird guy, and that's the end of that. But yeah, as it happened for this one, he decided to charge forward. Again, when you're under-leveled, the AI leaders tend to actually charge forward. If you're over-leveled, they tend to try to play it a little bit safer. Was having the Warlock here throw out a few fireballs just to at least train an augment or something. Actually, I don't think he's even got augments yet, so he's just throwing out fireballs to do that one damage that he can do. Got them terrified, poisoned, stunned, everything else, and everyone's still having a hard time taking him out, as they do. But overall, I was a little bit surprised that we actually were able to whittle down these octopi before the rest of the team was getting there. There's certainly some of the tougher units to deal with, even on a normal run, so it's a little bit surprising that this team of absolute nobodies was actually making some pretty decent headway on that. It's really Fear that was the big winner here. Basically, every time that Paul hit something with Terrifying Impact, he ended up causing a hell of a lot more damage there. And despite his weapon being grossly out of date at this point, he's still holding up. You know what? So there's that. Even the Warlock, I think, actually ended up getting a kill with the Fireball at this point with his dinky 1 damage. So there we go. It's something, you know. It's not the end of the world. It feels so weird finally doing a video after literally months of nothing. Which, by the way, for the record, no, it's not going back to the normal schedule. Everything is still insane over here, and there's way too many people in the house to ever even think about having time for doing one of these, but today was a rare exception, and I figured I'd at least get this one out because I already have all of the screenshots and everything here. But anyway, moving on. So yeah, when it comes to Fulkert and when it comes to Eustacia, I believe was the name of the Valkyrie, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah, the Rending Gale still holds up really well. It's one of the highest hitting moves at this point. But Mighty Impact from the Amazon, I forget her name at this point, as well as Canopus with his sleepy bullets there, tend to still be the highest damage. I had him switch back over to his axe for a little bit, since I was hoping to unlock Mantis Strike on him, seeing as all the other double hit moves were doing a really solid job. I could switch over to the sleep move on the bow at any point, but you know, getting access to Mantis Strike would be pretty handy. And yeah, we're still working on that crossbow finisher over there on the Dragoon. Here's the thing, though. Don't worry, she doesn't get that finisher before she dies. It's not much of a spoiler, but, you know, it's kind of an inevitability. But, anywho, so, you know, little by little, end up inching our way through, end up surrounding Orgeau, who got way too overconfident as he rushed forward there. And yeah, ended up getting himself pretty royally curb stomped here. There's that Sonic Blade coming in to finish him off. It's by far the most damaging move that this team has. And there's 10 Javelins that are going to completely change the game in a moment. Yes, throwing weapons, despite having never been used before. And this may come as a shock if you've never fiddled around with the multiplayer. The throwing weapons are actually fantastic in this game. It's just that they really don't have a role in the main campaign whatsoever. They're kind of just a money sink, but if you do multiplayer at all, which, no, there isn't a community for it before you ask. Yes, I would love to be hosting a community for it. Maybe someday. You know, we'll get there. So anyway, yeah, we do some team updates. Go for the Zabos fight here. You'll see about those throwing weapons in a little bit, but yeah, his team is just a brick wall, as you can tell. It's golems up front. You got the casters absolutely everywhere. Because we have no up-to-date armor on almost everybody, they absolutely shred these guys, since they've got every possible advantage. Basically, casters in Tactics Ogre are the equivalent. Like, since I like to compare every part of this game to New Vegas, because many of the mechanics are basically coming from the same thread of thought there, which is funny because they came out, I believe, like months apart of each other. Anyway, so yeah, they're basically the equivalent of Hollow Point rounds from New Vegas, where, yeah, they're gonna suck against most things, especially in the end game, but if you find the stuff that doesn't have armor, yeah, that's gonna get utterly destroyed by it. So it's around this point that we start realizing that, yeah, Zabos, he can charge forward all he friggin' wants. Like, even our leader there with his pretty decent damage is doing almost nothing. Everybody else gets slapped into the dirt like the dirt they are. We've got big AoEs coming in from the golems. Canopus basically can't even distract anybody back there anymore. He's trying, you know, he's doing his best. We've got the Amazon as kind of the main holdout of actual competence in the team. But yeah, she gets squashed too, so that first run didn't go too great. Tried recruiting Zabos, didn't work. I'm shocked. Anyway, so I figured, okay, one of our highest ranged attack bonuses right now is going to be coming from those Javelins. So, considering they basically never get used, let's give it a shot. Because the alternative is a start-of-the-game short bow, and even at rank 4, that's only 16 higher damage. That thing does, like, what, 27 actual damage at this point, compared to everybody else's 50, 60, whatever. And or, like, armor in the 60s to 80s or so, especially for Zabos. I'm completely pulling these numbers out of my rear end. I'm absolutely not certain on that whatsoever. Anyway, it's been, you know what, it's been a week for that kind of thing. As a little bit of a side note, I ended up, I was saying earlier, I'd mentioned what happened to the Vita. Sold it. Traded it for a Switch. Didn't actually end up using that Switch. My friend has that Switch. But I did have a different Switch. Bought it for next to nothing because I needed a case for my wife's Switch. So if anybody was on the Discord, you saw a pile of 3 Switches for some reason. But yeah, long story short, got that case, got a game I was looking for, and got my own Switch. And everything was good on it, except for the USB port, which was completely jacked up, which is also the only way to charge it, and also the only way to dock the dang thing. So it finally, I thought, gave out, because I had bent back as many of the pins as I could, which was a single pin. All the rest of them snapped off because the thing was completely mangled. So, well, it stops charging. So I open it up, I figure, it's still got some battery life in it. Maybe I can go ahead and repair it. And go figure, I managed to resolder that, that new USB port, and it looks pristine. I'm looking at it right now, and that's a pretty looking port. I'm surprised that went so well, considering I haven't soldered anything in like a decade. And, long story short, in the process of all this, actually before all of this, when I had first opened it up, there was these little battery connection pins. If you've ever opened up a device whatsoever, they're just basically the little, widgety dealy that the battery plugs into. That thing just shot right the hell off. Like, as soon as I opened it, I don't know if the previous guy had just super glued it on there or what. By the way, this is all over a montage of just the team getting absolutely owned. Don't worry, there's a few rounds of this. Anyway, so yeah, the thing just shot off, and I figured, okay, whatever, I'll just, while I'm at it, pick up some solder at the store, go slap that sucker back on there. And, well, it was going great until it wasn't. Had all the connections, all on there. Was waiting for the metal to fully dry, poking it back into place as you do. And yeah, at that point, it's let's just say the downsides of a extremely busy household suddenly came to bear, and so one very loud noise later was made to jump, at which point I dropped the soldering iron, at which point it ended up melting off part of the board, at which point I ended up having to douse that thing in a cup of coffee so that it wouldn't burn anything. Anyway, that thing's screwed. But funnily enough, apparently, allegedly, I don't know for sure yet, but allegedly there's like a soldering expert that lives like a few blocks from here, so supposedly he knows how to fix it. I literally just like listed the thing up for parts, and they're like, hey, that's an original model and you can mod those. That's kind of rare. So like, yeah, so can you show me how? And so we did. Anyway, so going back to, well, I mean, that's the plan anyway. Need to get the parts. Back to this, though. So, the whole thing with Zabos here was getting to be a bit of a pain. Because, yeah, even if we did actually land any damage on this guy, we wound up with a situation that his healers could easily out-heal anything that we did very quickly. See, for as much crap as the vanilla game healers get, they actually do their job really well. Like, if you test the AI teams against each other and how the, units were actually made, like, until you optimize, yeah, the game's actually reasonably difficult and the units are fairly well balanced. It's just that there's so many openings for optimization that you can, run clown mode through the entire frickin' thing. Namely, by this point, so lately I've been practicing on speedrunning the Japanese version of this as, a little bit of a side thing. Maybe I'll speedrun it for legit stuff someday. But yeah, you do, like, light crossbows, throw everybody through multiple teams throughout the run. Like, by this point, there's no reason you shouldn't have completely naked units running around with basically, like, bow guns, just sniping everybody with a single bolt. It's a little bit hilarious. Okay, there we go. Got it fixed. Yeah, the sheer audacity of hoping and praying. And, by the way, 167 damage, not terrible. We actually did manage to pull this off with a 2-shot here. But yeah, you actually, if we can go back a couple steps here, I just want to point out, you can actually get some pretty solid damage off of your newbies here. Yeah, go figure, this time it's going forward. I probably cut it out, but there was a previous part here where it just basically stopped working for no reason. But yeah, even your newbies, despite the fact that he had Breach on him, it was actually having no effect. I don't know why he still kept wasting Breach on him. Because, yeah, there was absolutely no point. It was doing no bonus damage. His armor is simply too high for all that. But we can still almost one-shot, bosses well this late into the game. So where does it go from here, then? Well, we get into the Hobberim fight, and he does the completely unrealistic thing of fighting off 2 ninjas. Hell no, he immediately dies to 1, pretty much as this fight goes on. I was hoping that we'd get access to Swordmasters, but, you know, suboptimal being what it is. He actually ended up outfighting the entire team, and unfortunately, he got hit by a bunch of debuffs, and so we couldn't really get down there in time. At least, I don't think we did. I don't remember getting him. It's been a minute. So he holds up to that first ninja, ends up doing a pretty solid counter, but he does not end up making it to the end of this fight, I'm fairly certain. It doesn't really matter, because we almost can't hurt anything on their team. See, by this point, what we need to be doing is another round of what I've been doing up to this point, namely whittling a few and recruiting them and getting their stuff and then upgrading everybody. Because really, if you have a couple of sets of equipment that you can go stack around for whatever you really need, you can actually, well, more or less keep up. And yeah, at this point, there was a whole lot of stuff going on, so I wasn't really keeping up as much. I figured I would wait for an easier fight. And, well, the easier fight that I was waiting for is, well, my memory not serving as well as it probably could have, because that fight is on a completely other route. So, anyway, what I wanted to do, basically, was to do everything but this route when it came to hires. So I got a few hires off of this particular map. What I wanted to do was go to the dragon map and get a whole bunch of units off there. Basically use Beast Tamer, Dragon Tamer, whatever the hell I had on hand to go get a bunch of rings, because they're actually carrying them around by this point in some cases. And then at that point I could basically pass those out to the team for a massive power spike all over the place without having to worry too much about specifics, or specific items or whatever else. Anyway, so we still ended up getting a few recruits on this fight instead. Yeah, I know, I got a little bit off track. Full disclosure, I do still have the COVIDs at this point. I don't think I ever made an announcement on that, which, of course, because there's really no need to. The latest flavor of the virus is basically a nuisance. Like, as it stands right now, the version that I got has consisted of the sniffles and weird aches and being tired at totally random parts of the day. Like, I'll go throughout most of the day feeling normal, and then suddenly just, like, get a headache and want to pass out, and then just go back to normal. Like, it's a really, really odd disease, I will say that much. We ended up getting it throughout the entire house due to, well, one person that was visiting, and, oh, look, she's going and going into the Disney Vault. But yeah, we had one person that had a test whose result was delayed due to some kind of clerical thing or whatever else. And then we all ended up getting it, and, well, hey, at least we got some time to test out that Switch that's currently sitting in pieces next to me. So, that was nice. Which, by the way, if anyone was on the fence about the Genesis collection on the Switch, and if you have kids, dude, that thing is such a great distraction. I have to say, like, okay, it is very strange to me that they ended up removing Echo, of all things. So, no more Echo the Dolphin games. That's been on there since the PS2 version. But, you know, still, a whole bunch of really solid games. They finally got Sonic 3D for once. Still no Sonic and Knuckles. That sucks. Yes, this is randomly a Genesis collection review out of nowhere. But yeah, the whole, like, putting your Genesis cartridges in the Genesis system thing there, like, the kids always found that really amusing. And yeah, they ended up loving the hell out of some Golden Axe there. Oh yeah, by the way, a bunch of our characters died in this fight, as you can tell. Basically, everybody was either losing lives or losing lives. So, yeah, whichever definition they went by, this is how that level count ended up. We ended up getting a ninja. She immediately lost all her gear. We ended up getting an upgraded axe. That was a big game changer. And then we ended up getting another wizard. He's very similar to the last wizard, but he's very tanky. So that's nice. Anyways, Marilda was dead. And this is when things start to get funny. It's one step towards the big funny, but we'll get there when we get there. So, he's got his sleepy move at this point. I can't get strength in 2 yet. He's a few levels off. If we were to get that, then his sleepy move would go back to one-shotting bosses. We've got our big hitter over here. She's also a few levels off. We can barely equip the fancy new ninja, and it turns out that despite having a finisher, she's actually overall less skilled than the one that we already had, so not as much of a benefit as you'd hope. And so we meet Marino, and so the plan was going to be fairly similar to last time, where we try to recruit some of the frontliners guarding the castle. Basically, on this route, you repeatedly go and take on this dang castle. Like, just it changes hands every other week. Some of the routes are funny like that, but what can you do, right? All right, back to it. Hopefully, didn't miss any parts here. Yeah, I had another dog barking incident. Fun. Always good to know that the dog loves to go throw out a bunch of noise right as the kiddos are trying to sleep. So here at this point, I was trying to, do the whole recruit thing, as you do, trying to have Canopus run off to the side, distract everybody, as he does. The strategy was starting to become very similar at this point, and many of the fights came down to surround the boss, isolate them, and try to recruit people while trying to hopefully survive. Trying to dedicate as few units to holding off the onslaught as possible, while having everybody else pile on somebody. And, well, it was starting to wane down here. 23%. I don't think... Did we end up getting... Oh, right, he was the archer guy. We finally got an archer. Or, actually, wait, this might have been the one where we got the archer, but still ended up losing anyway. Because I know I wound up with an archer on the team, finally. That took absolutely ages, but I don't remember if it was that guy. Basically, we wound up getting screwed over one of these times, but alright, so, as before, spellcasters absolutely shredding everybody. Dragons, less of a threat because they're more of a level equalizer, so in this case, they're basically doing about as much as they would do. They don't seem to have very much overhead damage, but they do seem to have a lot of direct damage, so to speak. Which, by the way, a funny note, I saw comments come up earlier today, basically asking, like, oh, I saw so many things saying all these classes just didn't work in this game and whatever else. And it was a funny moment to be able to bring up that, what, I specifically went and did the most suboptimal possible run of this game, and the guy was still a beast tamer for most of it with an axe, and if I recall correctly, that was the exact example that he ended up bringing up. Alright, we had a 2% on this cleric. Can you guess how it went? She didn't join. Yeah. So, yeah, she refused. She got an axe to the face, as you do. Unshockingly, most of the folks that are on the Wallister side tend to be fairly loyal. Because, they've been doing some pretty shady stuff up to this point. They probably want to stick together. Went for a Mistral Edge here. Conveniently ended up rolling high, so... got an upgraded sword. Can't use it yet, but it's nice to know that we have the option. And yeah, so that was nice. So we got Kellis here. He's an archer. He comes with a ring. He's only got 2 in his ranks, but hey, at least he's got strength and right. So yeah, we can't even use the bastard sword yet. What can you do? And then we get to Lennar. Now this one cracked me up, because this exact fight was one, this is the one... this was kind of the big end boss fight of this run, as far as I'm concerned. I'm actually not even super mad that the save file ended up getting corrupted, because this is the one that ended up getting brought up in a few places that I've seen over the years as this is such bullshit. You can't do it. You gotta be completely optimized for this, and you can't make it happen. It's impossible. And man, you have no idea how possible this fight is. So, okay, this guy is ridiculously underleveled at this point. I ended up, switching back and forth between a few different classes just to see what would happen. So, direct fight, sure, he gets squashed. He's got, gear that's 3 or 4 tiers behind everybody else. He's behind on levels. He's got no ranks. This guy outdoes him in every possible opportunity there. So... it would take about 5 finishers to finish him off, so that's not going to work, but he doesn't throw out stun, so I went for the Ring of Vitality here, went for the Balder setup to give him a bit more defense, was having a little bit of a hard time landing a hit on him, and I was trying to get him to stop hitting, so, we brought out the debuffs, tried to get rid of his overhead damage with a weaken, and tried to avoid some of it with a dodge, and of course then... ended up trying a parry, so I did end up buying parry on Denim, on one of the attempts, just to see what would happen. It was okay, but it wasn't super worth it yet. Basically, parry is one of those things where you have to have the defense or evasion to back it up. By itself, it usually won't be enough. Like, if I were to sit there and roll for RNG, sure, he could win with just parry alone, eventually. But yeah, the odds for that sucked, and so I figured, you know what, screw it, this guy is a dick. I'm gonna throw rocks at him, and then shield bash him off the edge. So he wasn't having that. Anyways, he ends up killing me here too. But the plan is coming together, you know? It became clear that he doesn't have steadfast. He can get knocked off the walls. Parry does work. And you know what? There's the funny little thing that yeah, notice how many steps there are to come up from that pit, and keep that in mind. So I was figuring, okay, what I'm going to do is I'm going to sit there, I'm going to build up a finisher, I'm going to wait for him to walk by a wall, use a finisher on him, and get him that way. Of course, overlooking the obvious thing that he can use his finisher at the same time. Unless I were to sit at that top wall up there, which, you know, technically that could work, you know, block off all of his avenues of getting up there, and sit there by that wall until he stands next to it, use a finisher, and then just repeat for the next 4 years. And sure, that would work, but that's not dumb enough. So I figured, you know what? I'm just going to throw rocks. But then, you know, my PSP battery ran out over an hour into that. Okay. So I didn't want to throw rocks, so I went for this. And so I went and I blocked his stuff there, and I started firing the crossbow. And then figured, okay, let's switch him to ranged AI and just walk away and leave it. So ranged AI is stupid, and he decided to go in for close range. So I set it all up again, and this time covered him up in rampant shadows in every direction, because Lennar has no ranged attacks. So I went ahead and started firing and firing and firing, and yeah, just put him in a nice little bubble. And then properly set it to ranged. This time, I remembered to actually plug in my PSP, and then I went to go clean the house for a couple hours. So, you know, he's saying he never wanted this. That is very accurate, by the way. Nobody should want this. You know, there he is. You know, Mr. Highly Skilled Knight over here. So ended up getting from rank nothing crossbows to rank 2. Ended up getting the first finisher there. He's now doing 80s with his finishers. It's not amazing, but it's something. So yeah, and he's still doing 1 damage. Doesn't matter. He's just going to keep shooting and shooting and shooting. His standard finishers do 40. That's fine. Whatever. We know we get about an extra 40 damage overhead there. And he's saying he grew strong. That's not wrong. He grew pretty strong. His trigger finger especially. That thing probably just looks like Schwarzenegger's arm at this point, just sticking out of his hand. So, yeah, then he tells everybody that he's got his girlfriend, who hates him, and to go to Rhyme to go fix stuff. So we do. And, yeah, this is around the point where I was starting to think, like, hey, maybe I should just go for Death Whale on Sub Optimus. At this point, he can just one-shot everything. So yeah, if you're curious, by the way, if you get crossbows to rank 8 with anybody, it doesn't matter how bad their stats are or whatever else, that move will more or less be able to one-shot anything in the entire game, like almost regardless of equipment. If you're even like if you've got any benefits whatsoever going towards your ranged attack, like even a basic bowgun at level 1 can one-shot most things through most of the game. If you've got anything beyond that, it's not even a contest. So this is more or less where the run stopped, because yeah, I was getting a little bit stumped on trying to do this guy here. It's doable. Basically, the way the numbers ended up leading, if I got a fear and 2 ranged finishers on Gamp, that'd be the end of him. They ended up getting swarmed by the birds, got swarmed by the chickens. And yeah, I got close a few times. Actually, wait, didn't I end up finishing this one? I think I might have ended up finishing this one. Let's just see what happens. Like I said, it's been a while. It's definitely not the most recent thing in the world, but like I said, there's almost no time to actually do these things these days. But yeah, I'd be curious. So if and when, you know, whenever the hell stuff is less chaotic around here, I was curious whether folks wanted to see One Vision next, or the original Tactics Ogre next. I mean, or Knight of Lotus, I guess, although that's kind of just playing Knight of Lotus normally. Because, honestly, you don't really need to visit the store that much in that game. But, yeah, let me know. I'd be curious to see what folks think. But yeah, so Brimstone Hail only doing 22 at its base value there. He's got pretty decent defenses. Gamp's actually pretty reasonably tanky, surprisingly more tanky than most of the bosses so far. It's doable. It's just that, yeah, he's got a healer. It all has to come from one big burst. And so eventually everybody ends up getting whittled down. And so that's when the javelins ended up coming back into play. Because the javelins, well, they can actually get past some defenses. They can do decent damage. Not amazing, but decent enough. And we've got our guy at level 8, who we're relying on for the majority of our damage. Bear in mind, he is about half of the level of the boss here. So, you know, the guy with boosted stats. So, that's nice. And you might be thinking, why not kill off his chickens or whatever else? And that's because we take enough damage as it is. And, well, we don't have a functional Dragoon anymore. The guy over there, he doesn't have any skills. He's just kind of here to level up Dragoons. And because he's got the level to use a Balder Spear, he doesn't have Beast Slayer, he doesn't have Dragon Slayer, he doesn't have any of that. Because he hasn't been in enough fights. So, you know, the guy's just basically shiny guy with pointy stick, as he do. But, yeah, not the end of the world as far as Gamp goes. But where does this end up going? Do we end up doing it? Let me just skip a few bits here to see. Let's see. We got him relatively low. We got petrified a bunch. Got past this section. Some frightening happened. Oh, yeah, no, we did do it somehow. What the hell did we end up doing? So let's see. We frightened Zanga. Got Gamp over there completely caught on the corner. Okay, so Malin was behind him, so she probably got a finisher off on him. Oh, yeah, Slumber Shot. I forgot how well Slumber Shot scaled. So, yeah, Slumber Shot is one of those weird things where it's kind of funky. Normal circumstances, it's pretty good. And then just out of nowhere, depending on a bunch of different circumstances, it can do an absolute ton of damage. So I forget exactly what it was in that particular situation. I think it's like almost none of his armor had pierce resistance or something. Anyway, we get to Vice's dumbest plan in the world. Just basically go to the protagonist of a completely different game and try to kill the guy. It doesn't go well for him. I mean, he does kill off this guy. I don't know why these 5 guys thought that they're going to win against a boss character, but whatever. I guess technically they've got a boss character on this side. I'm kind of tempted to remake that particular scenario in the multiplayer, just to see if he actually could win it. Because he's got heals, he's got counters, he's got big finishers. I mean, I feel like he probably could do it. Anyway, so we get to this part. So we got Haram. He's a Terror Knight that doesn't even have an accessory on him. He's not the toughest unit ever, but here's the thing. He's a plot Terror Knight, meaning that he's got bonus vitality. All of the plot Terror Knights have a bonus to their defenses. Like, they just scale down a lot of incoming damage. So I figured, you know, we'll go ahead and roll for a charm on the octopus. It can run in and maybe slap him once or twice, and then we just drop some finishers on him, and, you know, bing, bam, boom, we're done. Because beast units basically don't care about all that extra vitality. They'll usually slap him for 40 or 50 at this point anyway. And, you know, we just kind of repeated this process a few times, and then I ended up taking a break, and then I got a pretty decent offer on my Vita and ended up transferring everything over to my computer, then to my trusty PSP here, and unfortunately, yeah. This guy decided that the save is not good enough. So, and yeah, I did actually go check on the PC, so I guess it's more a transfer from the Vita's fault. So, you know, all of this actually brings me up to another idea that I had a little bit ago, which was whenever kind of restarting things again, I was really curious to take this old, you know, clackety old handheld here, and kind of wanted to just, like, since I got a working disk drive on this one, I was kind of hoping to go and see if, like, there's any differences whatsoever on the actual disc versions of a lot of these old games, because I've got a pile I've been saving up for a while, because I know it seems dumb, but I like collecting these UMDs. I mean, these just, like, they're such a terrible format. I love it. And yeah. So there was that. Oh, and I actually ended up starting a different run at one point. Didn't actually end up... I'm going to end up redoing it, but ended up starting the One Vision one. So it was Mr. Blue Collar Man and the Order of Long Nights and Impossible Odds. See if anyone remembers that song, but yeah, mostly because when I was talking about that speedrunning thing before, Got this disc of the Japanese version here, and, well, you know, mainly the difference is it makes these crunchy noises when you start it up. Let's see if it actually carries through in the microphone, because, here, go to this thing, go to this thing, cancel out of whatever I was doing at the time, and then it makes crunchy noises, and that's fascinating. I don't know, I think I'm probably the only one that actually enjoys the crunchy noises of these things, but, you know, I don't know, it's endearing. There's something about the PSP that is just my happy place, you know? But, anyway. So, let me know what you guys think. Sorry that this particular series ended in such a weird way, but realistically, I mean, take what you've already seen, and you can just kind of overlap it all the way through to Coda. That's basically what I was planning to do. So yeah. That more or less sums it up. All that would have happened from here on out is we next would have been looking for more units that had, like, the pre-Damask tier stuff. So we had some Brigandines already, we had some better weapons. Then everybody starts getting more levels eventually, and then we get better archers, which allow for carrying all the other classes a bit more. Eventually, hopefully getting better ninjas to be able to use some of their overpowered swords a bit better. Eventually, somebody would end up getting their skill ranks up high enough, probably Canopus if he didn't die, and then, you know, at that point, hopefully, you know, Denim would have gotten one of the better finishers, which, at that point, if he had gotten a better crossbow, like, I was going for a Balder crossbow drop at many points during this run, and, never ended up actually getting that drop. It was a little bit disappointing. I think the one time that I actually did see it drop was a failed attempt. But yeah, that about sums it up. We would just keep going until we got to Damask tier, and then at that point, like, after you pass Damask, once you get into the endgame stuff, if you get any of that equipment, I mean, at that point, you already have a just normal endgame character, and then at that point, you can carry that over to Coda. Because, so it would go through to endgame. You can't really recruit people anymore by the time you get to Hanging Gardens, so that would leave most of Chapter 2, which would mean we'd probably be going into the last fight with things like scorpions, maybe some, you know, some halberds or poleaxes if we got lucky, but that's pretty unlikely. More than likely, we'd end up going in with scorpions and tridents, and yeah, so it would go, and so eventually we'd get a better crossbow, eventually better bows. Probably would end up just using the Lombardia for many of those characters in the front there, once they could eventually use it, and yeah, like, basically you'd have to go through Palace of the Dead in order to complete Coda, which would mean everybody should have no reason not to be fully equipped by the end of it. And then Coda is basically normal at that point. I mean, we've already done solo, and funnily enough, one of the other saves I ended up losing over the course of this process here was one for what's it? So it was basically the soloist run. The idea being that it would go through the entire game solo, but also using a no stores, no crafting kind of rule set, as well as being a permadeath run. So basically, it is about as solo as you can get. It's playing the game as if it were a roguelike, minus the randomization elements for anything aside for... I mean, you basically would have a whole lot of randomness anyway. But yeah, I've been having a blast with that particular run, and it's something I've been slowly routing out for years, so that's another one that I got basically routed up to the point of Coda, and then that's kind of where stuff starts falling apart, because you get knocked off a cliff, that's the end of the run. And yeah, a lot of the Coda maps don't actually script having those cliffs as a unkillable space for Denim, meaning that you basically have to have Steadfast, which means you have to kick out something else, which means you want to replace some of your resistances with, you know, like resistances off of your gear, which you can't craft, which you have to get specific stuff for. Anyway, it's a whole thing. The point was that it was a weird challenge. And I'm kind of getting off topic at this point. But yeah, we've got all that stuff. So we've got a bunch of Tactics Ogre runs, and then the main, like, whenever I get this switch up and running, whether it's this particular one or I end up trading up to get another one, there's also a certain Funny Shapes game coming out pretty soon. So there's that too. So I'm excited for all this stuff anyway. So I'll see you next time. Again, sorry it's been literal months since the last one of these, but not much I can do. Alright, y'all have a good one. Take care, and stay safe out there.